Hey y'all, this is Brown at IF Brown. So I wanted to talk just a little bit about one of my favorite writers, a guy by the name of Peter Straub. So last night I learned that he had actually passed away on September 4th of 2022, and he was 79 years old, and apparently it was due to complications related to hip replacement surgery. So this was, kind of a sad bit for me because he was a guy who I think in terms of writing kind of made an impression on me, or he did make an impression on me, but just like the way I felt like there was a sort of expanded view of horror, mystery, and thriller when it came to reading some of his stuff for the first time, because I've always liked to read, but checking out some of his stuff way back when was a game changer. But first time I ever read something by him was a novel called Ghost Story, and this was back in the early 2000s when I first read it. But there was a bookstore called Barry and Terry's Book Tree, and it was run by these two twins named Barry and Terry. Really nice guys, right? And so I remember I would go in there to look for comic books, but I also started to look around for novels and what have you, and there were usually some things at good prices there. And I'd heard the name Peter Straub being thrown around quite a bit, like say in comparison to Stephen King, Clive Barker, and Dean Koontz and what have you. I mean, they had different styles, but they ran in similar crowds, But I asked Barry and Terry about him, and they told me a bit about him, like what he wrote and their opinions on him, and so he said that, or I should say, they said, I don't remember which one it was, which twin it was, but one of them said that Ghost Story would actually be a good place to start if I've never read anything by Peter Straub before, and so I checked it out, and yeah, it's easily one of my favorite horror novels. It became one of my favorite horror novels after I read it, and it's still one of my favorite horror novels to this day. And I remember, after that, there was a website called Epinions, which I used to write reviews on. I had the handle Real Ponderings, and that was one of my 5-star reviews. When I reviewed Ghost Story, that was one of the things I gave 5 stars to. But yeah, so it was something that you read that particular novel, and it starts off as one thing, then it becomes something else, and then it becomes something else. But it still stays as one story, but it's a story that's constantly, or I should say gradually evolving, because there are a lot of revelations that come into play that kind of changes how you view certain events in the story once certain revelations come to light. And so and also there were a lot of I guess you could say moments where it felt like there was a story within a story, and much like the title Ghost Story, you really did feel like you were reading a ghost story, and you're kind of like, what happens next, and you're kind of on the edge of your seat. And so and I remember that Barry and Terry had pointed out a specific scene from the novel, and once I came across that scene, I was kind of like, yeah, I see what they were talking about, because they were talking about how there was a particular scene where this one character's jogging through the snow, and he suddenly gets the feeling that he's being watched. And so he stops, right? And he looks behind him, there's nothing. And mind you, this is like a snowy landscape, all right? It's winter, in the town and what have you. And so he looks around, he doesn't see anything, he doesn't see anyone watching him. And so he's like, okay. And so he starts jogging again, and that feeling just gets stronger. And so he makes a point to run to a spot where there's like a couple of trees and what have you. So, he has, something that he can maybe, catch a grip on and actually catch his breath and look around. So, he looks around, he doesn't see anything. And so, he's like, what the heck's going on, right? And so he keeps jogging some more, and that feeling just keeps getting stronger and stronger until he knows someone or something is watching him. And then he feels like he can feel it, like something, whatever this person or thing is, it's chasing him. Okay, like he knows deep in his bones that, you know, whoever or whatever was watching him is now coming after him. And so he basically starts running for his life. And he gets to a spot where I think there was like more bushes and trees, you know, a spot where, you know, he could maybe take some cover, right? And so he gets there and he's out of breath and he looks behind him. Nothing's there. There's no one chasing him. And he looks to see like where, you know, those other trees were, and he sees on the ground these footprints. The only footprints that, you know, he can see are his own. And, you know, it's something that terrifies him, because he knew that someone or something was first watching him and then chasing him. But there's no sign of this person or thing. And so the way Peter Straub wrote that particular scene, it was probably one of the most unsettling, you know, bits I had read at the time in a horror novel. And to this day, it's, you know, something that I remember the impact that it had, you know, because it described what the guy was thinking and all the thoughts that were going through his head, and just, you know, how he was gradually getting more and more on edge into where he was straight up terrified. And so when I got to that scene, I'm like, yeah, Barry and Terry were right. And so anyway, yeah, they also made a movie off of Ghost Story. I think it was in 1981. And the first time I saw it, I didn't really like it that much. I mean, there were things I liked about it. I mean, Alice Krige as the villainous ghost. I mean, you know, she was fantastic. I mean, she was beautiful too, okay? I mean, that had a lot to do with it too. But she was also very eerie. And so I liked her, but I just didn't like the movie that much. But then I think it was because they made a lot of changes in the movie that were very different from the book. And so the book came away being much better by a mile. But then fast forward several years later, you know, I watched the movie again, and actually I liked it. You know, if you accept the fact that it's basically a different animal from the novel, it's a good movie. And so, I mean, you know, definitely, if you like to read, if you like, you know, the horror genre, definitely check out Ghost Story, because it's one of Peter Straub's best, and it's probably one of the best quote-unquote ghost stories you'll ever read. And also, the movie is pretty good too. So just bear in mind that the two are different animals altogether. But anyway, though, yeah. So after Ghost Story, yeah, I went back. I was like, hey, what else have you got by the guy? I mean, this was awesome, you know. And so, you know, they set me up with a couple of novels, and they probably said, oh yeah, we got this. And so, you know, that's how I came across Julia, If You Could See Me Now, Shadowland, Floating Dragon, Koko. And so, I mean, Mystery, The Throat, and, you know, just it was interesting, you know, reading stuff like in that order, because you go from, say, you know, psychological horror, supernatural horror, you know, or something in between, and then you got, you know, thriller, murder mysteries, and what have you. So, I mean, Peter Straub, I mean, you know, he never stayed in, you know, one territory. You know, he was always trying to change things, as far as, even if, say, he wrote a supernatural horror novel, you know, back to back with another one, the nature of the horror was usually different. But like Shadowland, for example, I mean, you know, that's a novel that, you know, it's been a long time since I've read it, but that was kind of like a, you know, horror slash, you know, fantasy. I mean, it was like a combining of the two genres, in the sense that, you know, there's like dark magic and what have you involved. And so, and I just remember, you know, thinking how fascinating it was that, from what I remember, you know, that, you know, it's because of the magic on hand, I mean, there's a certain amount of wonder, but then, as the magic is sort of tampered with, by the characters, the consequences get darker, and, the consequences basically, result in, a lot of people, basically going through some terrifying events, and, so that wonder turns to horror, and then it turns to wonder again. But then at some point it kind of balances the line between wonder and horror. So Peter Straub was pretty good at, combining, I guess you could say, the emotions that come with different genres into one book. But I think my favorites of the books I've read by him were Ghost Story, Shadowland, and Koko, and Mystery. But so Ghost Story and Shadowland were straight up, supernatural horror, whereas Koko and Mystery were more murder mystery / thrillers. And so if you like murder mysteries, Koko and Mystery are definitely good choices. If you like, say, straight up supernatural horror, Ghost Story and Shadowland are great examples too. But yeah, so just the guy was an excellent writer, and I haven't read every single thing of his, but the stuff I have read, for the most part, I enjoyed. I did think that, say, his short stories, overall, I think he wrote a couple of good short stories, but a lot of the short stories I read by him, I didn't think were that good. He was one of those writers who, in my opinion, was great at writing novels, but his short stories, could have been better. And that's something that I felt like is kind of the opposite of, say, someone like Clive Barker. A lot of people think that, his short stories are excellent, but his novels could have been better, that kind of thing. I mean, personally, I liked both his short stories and Clive Barker's novels too, but it's just with Peter Straub, from the short stories I read in comparison to his novels, he was better as a novelist than a short story writer, just in my opinion. So, but that being said, I mean, this, being introduced to his literature, I mean, it really, I think, broadened my horizons as far as my appreciation for the horror genre, and as it continued to grow. And so, yeah, I just, for a while, I followed his career and what have you. There were still some books I need to read, by him. I mean, he did a collaboration with Stephen King. I think it was called The Talisman, and a sequel called Black House. I've got the books, I just haven't read them yet. But, and there was another one called Mr. X that I need to read. I heard was pretty good. But yeah, so the stuff I have read by him, for the most part, I mean, very groundbreaking, as at least as far as, the ones I would consider masterpieces would go. And his novels especially, took you on kind of a literary journey through, the wondrous, features of, the human psyche, as well as, the supernatural, realm of horror. And sometimes you even have moments of, unexpected beauty here and there, which, kind of goes to show just how talented Peter Straub was when it came to, say, even in something that was really dark, you'd have a very human or compassionate moment and what have you. So, but yeah, so that was, that's, my little take on Peter Straub. That's my, memory of being introduced to his work. And, yeah, so I just, I hadn't followed his career in a while. You know how it is, life gets in the way. But, I mean, I think I was looking up some stuff that, sort of tied into some of his work last night. And I was like, what's he been up to these days? And so when I found out he had died, I'm like, oh crap, because this is a guy whose work I admired. So, yeah, I just wanted to, say, hey, rest in peace, Pierce Straub. Thanks for the memories, and thanks for broadening my horizons. So, anyway, if y'all want to check out some of his stuff, please do so. Even if you don't like it, I mean, you'll have to admit it's definitely a flavor all its own, so to speak. But hopefully, if y'all do check his stuff out, y'all will enjoy it. But thanks for taking the time to listen to this. Y'all have a good day. Take care. Bye.